This is the worst podcast I've ever been on.
These guys are shit. It's true. It's true.
This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Hard-Traveling Fanboys, 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 Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Welcome once again, Place to Be Nation listeners, to the longest running weekly
episodic comic book podcast in all Place to Be Nation. My God, Greg.
That was awful, yeah.
No.
We are the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. I'm Greg Phillips. That voice on the other end of the line there is Nick Duke. And we are bringing you something a little bit different for the show. As many long-time listeners may know, we, on our fifth week episodes, which don't happen that often, but on our fifth episodes, we have in the past done giant size editions where we bring in a world of collaborators to do projects like the Fantasy Comics Draft or the Watchmen audio, which is still in production. But this time we're going to start a new kind of recurring feature on the show that is drawing back to our days when we were writing a column for the website. We used to do, actually our first stuff that we ever wrote for Place to Be Nation was called Secret Origin, and it was kind of the story of our journey into comics, how Nick and I became comic book fans, how the comic book love kind of bridged our friendship in college. And so we thought we want to go out into the world and interview other interesting people about comics and their journeys into the world of comics. So in this debut episode of the Secret Origin podcast, we have a very special guest, first-time guest here of the show and a Place to Be Nation. He is the WWE SmackDown referee. You see him every Tuesday night on USA Network. WWE official Jason Ayers, and as you're about to hear, he's also a longtime comic book fan. Jason, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Our pleasure indeed. And I guess kind of the premise of this show is to find out how you kind of came to fall in love with comics, because I understand that as much as you're passionate about your career, you're also very passionate about comic books.
Yeah, absolutely. So, growing up, I've been in a military family. So we every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and when I was a kid, it was one of those things. No matter what school I ended up at, or no matter where I ended up in my life, the two things that always followed, I always had something I could connect with somebody on. You know, whether it be first grade, sixth grade, or even going up into high school, were professional wrestling and comic books. There was always going to be somebody in my class that shared that same, at least one of those, if not both, because there's a lot of crossover between the odds. But there was always going to be somebody that I could just connect immediately with on that. So it's one of those things that just kind of followed me throughout my life, on up to now even.
Why do you think there is? I was thinking about that today. Nick and I have talked about it in the past on the show. Why do you think there is such a crossover between comic book fandom and wrestling fandom?
I've talked about this a lot with guys in the wrestling sphere and in the comic book sphere. There's a lot. If you think about it, goes down to it. Professional wrestling, sports entertainment, whatever term you want to use for what what I do in my Clark Kent life, is basically it's a good guy and a bad guy and an issue that they're in conflict over. And comic books, when it boils down to it, it's a good guy and a bad guy and an issue that they're in conflict over. So, I mean, it's kind of almost like comic book superheroes come to life. The tights maybe are a little skimpier and a little less clothing going on, and the combat may be a little more hand to hand and a little less laser beams. But a lot of it's the same same thing, same storytelling, and same kind of tropes to a lot of it.
Awesome.
Now, and you can jump in here if you want to, Nick. I was just going to say, with Nick and I, our love of comics started kind of similarly, but at different ages. Like for me, I remember being 4 years old and walking, and back in those days, it was when you go to the grocery store and you'd find comics still on the newsstand and at the spinner rack. So I remember Superman number 14 by John Byrne when I was 4 years old. I begged my mom to buy this for me because it had Superman on it. And it sort of started my love affair with comics. Nick, you actually, I think, got Spider-Man at Walmart. Is that correct?
Yeah, so right after the first Sam Raimi movie came out, let's see, Ultimate Spider-Man at that point had been going about a year and a half, going on 2 years. And so they had done a repackaged version of the first trade paperback that they had done just for Walmart. And so I was just kind of walking the aisles and picked it up and immediately fell in love and wound up buying that, and then went to Barnes & Noble and picked up like every trade of the series they had, and it was a slippery slope from there. So I guess what we're getting to is, like, is there a book like that you remember being, your first one?
Over the years, there was, one or two here and there that were kind of, when I look back, I don't really remember the specific moment of walking in the store and picking it up. Man of Steel 1 when, the 80s was 86, 87, that reboot. Yep. I remember picking that one up. I remember specifically picking that one up, but when I look back through the collection and I see that was in there, I'm like, oh yeah. So there was, little ones here and there over the years, but when I really first started getting heavily into collecting and reading and that sort of thing, we were living in Japan at the time. My dad was stationed over there, and obviously when you're on the military base, it's kind of like little America, and you're kind of beholden to what the base exchange store has as far as toys, as far as games, as far as books and that sort of thing. And they had not maybe a spinner rack worth, but it was just on a normal shelf of handful of Marvel books and a handful of DC books they just carried every week, and I would assume we were probably a little behind stateside more than likely, but it's hard to say now. But the X-Men books and the Superman books I picked up religiously, no matter what, every time it came out, I'm begging my mom, hey, can I just this one here, just this time, not every time, just this time. And of course, just this time was every time. But yeah, and it was one of those things where the collector instinct took over and I had to get every week. Right. Superman was releasing a new book every week, with the little diamond with the triangle chronologically. Yep. Yeah. And that was around this time also as the Doomsday Saga. So that really hooked me.
Oh man. Yeah. That was huge.
Yeah, the Doomsday Saga, the Age of Apocalypse hooked me really, really deep. And I've always been a sucker for alternate universe stories, and I don't know what that says about me as a person, but yeah, those were kind of the real seminal stories that kind of hooked my interest, and then from there I was off to the races. I had to read everything I could get my hands on. I'm picking up trades of Dark Phoenix and trades of the Metro Saga on the X-Men side, and read just everything I could get my hands on.
Yeah, it's interesting how that era of late 80s, early 90s comics was so big. Like, people kind of forget about how big it was. Because I remember I was at elementary school, we would have like these arguments at the playground about who would win between these characters, or who was going to end up when Strife takes his mask off. What's he going to look like in the X-Men books? Or who was the real Superman during the reign of the Superman storyline, stuff like that. One of the other things of that era, and I don't know if you had a chance to get into this stuff, but do you remember the trading card phenomenon of the early 90s with Marvel cards and stuff? Did you ever get into those?
Oh, absolutely. I think I still have them out in the garage.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of, before I got into comic books, I was a huge baseball card collector. So then as I started reading the books, it was just kind of a natural progression to pick up, all of those sets, the Marvel Masterworks. I remember I got real heavy into. I think it was, didn't Fleer have Flair series or something? A little bit heavier card stock. Yeah. And it was just, it feels like it was a different time collection wise. I don't know that the trading cards would fly as much today.
Mm-mm. No, it was definitely a different time because, we I guess our generation just wanted to have something to collect. We had comics, we had cards, we had Pogs for a while, so like, it was, those cards were so amazing because all the playground arguments, we would try to settle them by looking at the back of the Marvel. Well, he's got a 7 energy projection. Oh yeah, well Captain America's got a 7 fighting ability. So who's going to win there? So it's just a fun time as a fan. So kind of as you went into these storylines, you mentioned Death of Superman, Age of Apocalypse. What are some of the stories that have kind of defined your fandom? I'll give you an example from our end. Like Nick and I, we tell the story a lot, but we're huge Jeff Johns fans because we both got into his Green Lantern run pretty long, and it's weirdly sort of forged all these. It made our friendship stronger because we had all of our friends were reading this Green Lantern title at the same time, and so we followed it over the course of what it was years, basically. And that's kind of what we look back as one of our sort of defining comic books. And for Nick, Ultimate Spider-Man would be that as well. What are some of the stories or runs for you that have kind of defined your fandom?
So the one that I always come back to is always Dark Phoenix Saga. That's just my, A1, number one time favorite story, arc, run, whatever you want to call it. Which is why it breaks my heart so bad that the movies have been so terrible every time.
I was about to ask you about that.
Oh my goodness. We're 2 strikes right now.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. I'm praying that Kevin Feige is able to do something with that, please, for the love of God. But no, and not even just Dark Phoenix, but obviously that's the A1, number one, that whole Claremont run, obviously was a little interesting towards the end, but the early Claremont stuff, especially the Claremont Burn stuff, I just absolutely, I could reread that every day. And sometimes I do. That's one of my go-tos on the airplane is just kind of bounce back and reread some of that old Claremont run of X-Men, especially the Dark Phoenix stuff.
What is it about it that sort of stands the test of time? Certainly, I don't know that X-Men has had. I love a lot of the X-Men stories from when I was a kid, Afflictions and all that stuff. It was good stuff, but it doesn't feel like it stood the test of time the way that the Claremont, certainly the Claremont and Byrne era, but really Claremont and all of his collaborators did.
I think what it is it feels like he had such a vision of where he wanted to go with everything, and little moments early would pay off years down the line, and just. The web would weave as time would go on over that entire run of books, and there'd be callbacks to things that happened 100 issues ago, 50 issues ago, or whatever. And kind of tying that back into my other love, being pro wrestling, it's kind of that ecosystem of things that have happened and lore that builds on itself. Same kind of thing with characters that have built over 10 years, 20 years, or whatever. I think that's what really gets me is that years upon years of lore to draw from.
You mentioned getting into comics at an early age and then kind of having to go back and find stuff. I feel like it's kind of spoiled with stuff like Marvel Unlimited or DC Universe. What was that experience like, having to seek things out? Because it used to be a lot more difficult than it is now. And where would you find these things as you bounced around from place to place?
Yeah, I got lucky in that there were just a few. Maybe that's why I keep going back to Dark Phoenix in that era, because those I was able to find collected trades of. Right. Just paperback. Nothing not like a hardcover omnibus like you would have on your shelf now, but just just the basic old trade paperbacks. And I don't even remember where I found them. I think they had some of them at the base military base bookstores, and as we got back stateside in later years, but a lot of that kind of thing. So as I getting older into high school and started getting more into actually being part of the wrestling community and, getting involved in that as a career, which started that my sophomore year of high school. So as that kind of started to take over as the primary, comics kind of went on the back burner a little bit. So, I missed probably most of the 2000s up into the early 2010s, up until Secret Wars, the Hickman Secret Wars run, what really hooked me back in. And it's, just since, which is 4 years ago now, 4 or 5 years. It's been just a mad dash of, people talk about, well, this run was awesome. Okay, well, Marvel Unlimited, go gadget iPad, and let's read that one. And, just kind of catching up on all the stuff that I feel like I missed over those years, almost as a disservice to myself, just because of the nature of life.
Yeah, no, that makes plenty of sense. the Nick, I know, is high on that Secret Wars series, so he talks about it all the time as being one of his modern favorite crossover events. So it's cool that it hooked you back in, and made you a fan again.
Yeah, you know what's cool about that to me, and I don't know if you feel the same way. It felt like all those side miniseries felt like a love letter to the longtime comic fan.
Yep.
So like the little 4-issue Extinction Agenda and 4 or 5 issue Civil War redo, and just all of those. It was like, oh man, these were all the things that to me back then, and now I'm reading about new light with a new set of eyes. It was just really cool, and I think that was just the perfect time, perfect storm of everything to hook me back in. And boy, if I ain't hooked back in now.
that was probably one of the event series in recent memory anyway, with some of the best tie-ins, really. And not all of them were like essentials to the story, but you felt like you said, like you were getting some sort of fan service out of most of them. Like I remember reading, oh god, I read a lot of them. Old Man Logan was great and wound up, spinning off into its own ongoing series. Spider-Man Renew Your Vows was kind of the same thing, and that one definitely felt like a fan servicey love letter kind of thing, where Dan Slott is saying, okay, if you're one of those people who's hated my run because the marriage is, here's just a little bit of fan service for you to kind of tide you over a little bit. So yeah, I definitely love that series as well. It's interesting with that one. I was never a big Fantastic Four fan, and then by the time Secret Wars ended, I was like, I just read a Fantastic Four story, but didn't know it until the very end when you kind of like see the pieces put together. Were you a big FF fan at any point?
I never really was. Kind of same thing, and until Secret Wars, and then it ended, and the Fantastic Four went away into Foxland, and.
Hi folks, Todd Weber here, the manager. We had a little bit of audio difficulty here, and we dropped the call for a brief moment. We assume that Jason is talking about the Fox film Fantastic Four and how terrible, how bowling shoe ugly it is, and how it derailed the Fantastic Four for years to come in the eyes of the public.
I rail about it on my Twitter on semi-regular occasion. One of the few movies I hold a personal issue with.
We have not seen it yet. We're actually planning to watch. We're doing a series where we watch worst comic book movies and try to figure out if there was a way to save them. And that's actually the next one we were planning on doing was the Josh Trank Fantastic Four.
Oh, you poor guys. I took my son to see it at the Dollar Theater, and I still felt like I got gypped. It was just, okay, let me put it this way. I feel like it would be a good movie, but not necessarily a good Fantastic Four movie.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I understand that.
I mean, I'm somebody that I didn't even think the first Fantastic Four movie was very good. But I heard from almost everybody that it is significantly better than this one.
Yeah, I didn't hate the first two. Even the Surfer movie, they were fun. Exactly, they weren't necessarily going to win an Oscar, but they were fun.
Yeah, kind of lighthearted.
This one was not fun.
Yeah, kind of lighthearted and goofy, which captures honestly, kind of the feel of those early Fantastic Four stories that people still look back on so fondly today. You mentioned you have a son. Have you been trying to introduce him to comics at all? How's that process going?
I do actually. I've got one's 11, one's 3. The 3-year-old, he's more into his Disney princess comic books and that sort of thing. But my 11-year-old, he really is getting into Miles Morales and some of the younger characters, kind of some of the champions, the Kamala Khans and younger characters for younger readers, which I think is kind of cool.
Right.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
That's
great. I mean, we talked about Nick and I a bunch of times about how comics in the last 15, 20 years had, for as much as they'd catered to audiences like us, they had kind of lost the kids audience a little bit because everything was kind of being written and made for adults. And so I think Miles and Kamala and so many of these young characters that have come up in recent years have reared an audience that has always been there and wanting content, but they just haven't been getting content for so long. So definitely a cool thing that your kids are able to get into comics in sort of a similar way to what you did.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to watch them, and see what they gravitate towards and what about those characters and that sort of thing. We went to see Into the Spider-Verse, and that just absolutely, obviously the art style and, the throwback fan service types of things really hooked me. But then at the same time, watching him with Miles and with Gwen and, those characters. It was very cool to share that moment.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was actually what I was going to get to next, is talking about outside media, outside of comics. What was your history with that? We've told about how we first saw the '89 Batman movie or whatever it was in our youths that sort of sucked us in. I remember the Christopher Reeve Superman, the first comic book media I remember in my lifetime. But what about you? What outside comic book related media kind of drew you in as a youngster, and what are your favorites now today?
Same. The '89 Keaton Batman movie was just incredible for its time, especially, it's one of the few that maybe doesn't hold up 100%, but still holds up pretty well. But at the same time, I think for me, I was more of a Saturday morning cartoon kind of guy. Mm-hmm. So X-Men the animated series was always my go-to. I kind of drifted off a little bit from the Saturday morning cartoons before the Spider-Man animated series, and I feel like wasn't there a Fantastic Four series kind of around that same time?
There was Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Hulk, and I think a really bad Avengers show all around that same time.
Right, yeah. And I'd kind of drifted off by that time, but, X-Men the Animated Series is one that stuck with me even up till now. It's one of those that when I can track it down, I'll throw an episode or two on an airplane on a flight somewhere.
It really was one of the first shows, live action or cartoon, to approach comic books in the same way that comic books did, in terms of telling long-term narrative storytelling that would pay off threads from earlier seasons. The death of Morph in the first episode, and he comes back in the second season and is like one of the main bad guys. And, that was really revolutionary for the time. I've been watching Saturday morning cartoons since I was a kid, and I had never really seen anything like it. And it drew me in from day one. And to this day, I'm still super nostalgic about it. I'm the staunchest defender of the Jim Lee era costumes that you'll find.
Yeah.
What about you with that assessment of the show? What was it about the show that kind of makes it stand out?
Yeah, definitely. The long-term payoffs, and kind of the same sort of thing as the Claremont run with me there was this ecosystem of lore that's built up over season upon season upon season. But at the same time, what was cool to me was that if you had read the source material and read the original books, it stayed pretty true to most of what happened in stories that it was adapting. And I'm conscious when it comes to that sort of thing. Like I want my movies and I want my cartoons and I want my shows to be pretty faithful adaptations of the source material, which is maybe why I hold such a grudge against the Trank Fantastic. But and that was one of the things that I just absolutely loved about that. It was, I've read this story. Okay, cool. Hey, so, buddy in elementary school. So here's where this is going. This is what's getting ready to happen here. Check this out. It's gonna be great. And like just being able to puff that and have those kind of fan service kind of payoffs was awesome to 10-year-old me or whatever I was at that point.
One of the things I always loved about both X-Men the Animated Series and later Batman the Animated Series was, we've talked about it before, we feel like a lot of times kids programming will kind of talk down to kids or treat them like they're stupid, and I always felt like X-Men the Animated Series and Batman never did that to us. Like it when we were coming up, I felt like it gave us a little credit and depended on us to remember things and callbacks and like you said, kind of track that long form. And so like even watching it as a kid, I just remember feeling like this is a show that is not speaking down to me or patronizing me in any way, and I always appreciated it even as a kid. Yeah,
which I think is one of the things why it holds up so well now, because right. Without that talking down to or patronizing or the G.I. Joe don't burn your hand on a hot burner stuff, like, which for what it's worth it was great for the time, but with the kind of you better not or I'm Captain America and I'm here to save you kitten in a tree or whatever, like without that kind of stuff, with it treating you like a consumer of this media and not just a kid watching Saturday morning cartoons, I think maybe is part of why it holds up so well now for, even the nostalgic adult viewer or, watching it back on Hulu or whatever.
And sometimes when they would have a character deliver that sanctimonious, grandstanding speech, Wolverine would walk up and punch him in the gut. So it was kind of nice as a kid to see the flip flop of what I had grown up seeing on G.I. Joe and He-Man and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely, and it influenced shows like Justice League Unlimited years later, which did the same kind of long form callback storytelling, and really reflects the medium. And you drew the comparison to wrestling, and I think that's a really great one. Talk about long form storytelling and this ecosystem of lore, because like I remember as a kid, like you if you like something, you're gonna remember it, and generally when you're a kid. And so I remember, Bret Hart and the British Bulldog wrestle at In Your House in December '95, and I'm like freaking out, and my friends are like, "Why are you so excited about this random match?" I'm like, "Well, because they wrestled in '92 and the Bulldog beat him. How's Bret gonna get over on him this time?" It was it's the similar kind of patterns that I think drive us all together. What do you remember? Were you a fan when Raven would wear like the comic book T-shirts out on Nitro? Like he had a Sandman shirt. I mean, that was so cool. What do you remember seeing, guys? What is your first recollection comics influence into pro wrestling?
Obviously, I think the one that you kind of go back to a lot is Hurricane Helms. It was the first real superhero, and it was done kind of for camp and for a little bit more gimmicky, but like it.
But it was over as hell.
Yeah, right, and getting to know him now and work with him, in the capacity that we're all in now. He's a legitimate huge comic book fan, so he was drawing on. That's why he has the Green Lantern tattoo on his shoulder. So it was done kind of as more of a nod back, or stuff like Rey Mysterio always has something different variation of his gear, especially for the WrestleManias. He always seems to draw on a superhero or from a comic book character or a movie or whatever. I think that was kind of the earliest type of thing. And then, as I started getting into the company after I got hired as a ref in 12, you kind of start to realize that, man, a lot of these guys they're just kind of closet nerds like me that grew up on the same stuff. And it just kind of, draws us all together. Like, I can roll in and, from the props and carps guys to the video guys to the backstage workers to the producers to the wrestlers, and hey, did you read that? Did you read that new House of X? Or hey, did you check out Absolute Carnage? Or whatever's dropping. Like those are the kind of conversations that I'll spend 15-20 minutes just sitting on a road case when I probably should be doing something else. Like that's kind of what I spend my days doing.
So, who are some of your favorite guys to rap with about this kind of stuff?
So on the roster, I know Cedric Alexander's a big comic book fan. He and I talk a little bit. Mike Rome, the Raw ring announcer, is a gigantic comic book fan, actually, to the point that he and I have talked about some ideas we have for a couple of things. But honestly, a lot of it are the people you wouldn't know. Right. Like I said, like some of the guys that work backstage is one of the props stage carps guys' name. His name. He and I'll talk comic books, current and old school, and for just hours if we got the time to do it. Just you find people perk up when you're talking with somebody about whatever, whether it be old stuff or new stuff or whatever's going on. And oh yeah, no, what I read that. What do you think about this? Or whatever character they like. Oh, you're a fan too. Oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, well we'll double back to that. But it's more of the roster than not, I think, at this point, at least have a passing interest.
What is it right now that is that most people are talking about? Is it House of X? Because that seems to be the topic du jour on the internet. Is it the same way for you guys backstage?
It is with me, just because that's what I'm tracking people down to. Hey, okay, so on this, because Hickman book, I want to hear everybody's takes on things and kind of, okay, how did you interpret this and where do you think this is going, kind of thing. That's kind of the big one right now. There's a few guys that I'll talk old school stuff with, because right now, so my big thing when I'm on the road is I like to go to local comic shops or just find in whatever town I'm in, find the local comic shop and let's go back issue digging. So I trying to fill out the Claremont runs and, working on finishing out an X Factor run and a New Mutants run and, those 90s X books, just because there's a finite number to them. So it kind of focuses my digging a little bit, and that's kind of a lot of what I'll talk to a lot of guys about, some of those older school 90s stuff that we grew up on.
That was going to be a question I was going to have is being on the road so much, how do you maintain the fandom? Is it going to the places in the cities that you're in, or do you kind of have a home base when you get back from the road where you're picking your stuff up?
Yeah, no, I do have my home base here in Orlando, shop called Epic Comics down south of town that always pulls my stuff. And that's the nice thing about the schedule we're on right now. So SmackDown's on a Tuesday. That means I'm flying home on a Wednesday. So by the time I get on the ground, my route from the airport just happens to take me by Epic Comics. It's the dang thing. So I can pick up my Wednesday books. But yeah, and so it doesn't really make sense for me to do much hunting for new stuff when I'm on the road because I'm getting that taken care of when I get back home. So it's more digging for older back issues and just, okay, what do you got? What do you got here? What can I find here that I'm not going to find elsewhere?
What's your favorite discovery that you've made back shooting? Has there been any random ones or weird ones or one that stood out as I can't believe I found this?
Yeah. So we were in one of the Dakotas. I can't remember if it was North Dakota or South Dakota. And I met with the ring build. So we finished the ring build and it's maybe, I don't know, noonish, lunchtime, give or take. And a bunch of us went to go grab some lunch, and on the walk back from wherever we went, whatever restaurant it was, there was this gigantic 2-story thrift store. Not really thrift store, more like a pawn shop like you would see on, Core Pawn or Pawn Stars, or, it looks like it's more of a Hollywoodish type of thing in Bismarck, North Dakota, or wherever we were. And I'm digging around, just kind of walking around the store, and they had like a china cabinet with a shelf there, and there was 4 or 5 just floppies sitting there, and okay, let me check this out. And they had X Factor 5 and X Factor 6 both, both the cameo Apocalypse and the full Apocalypse first appearances for like $3.
No way.
So, yeah, awesome. So that's the thing. Like, you go to some of these thrift stores or pawn stores or whatever, and they don't know what they have. It's just comic books. All right, $2, whatever. Like that's what gets me.
Yeah, dude, I miss that. I used to go. When I was in high school and early college, we used to have a lot of. I come from Mobile, Alabama, and there's several, thrift stores and flea markets around town. I used to love going to these flea markets and just digging through their comic book collections and finding and stuff. That's where I found a copy of my very first comic book, Superman number 14, and so it's just amazing what you can find. But that's insane, man. That was an insane bill. But that's part of the joy of it, right? That's the part of the joy of going to these comic book shops.
That's it, man. And and the problem nowadays with the proliferation of comic book fandom, thanks to Marvel Cinematic and all the success of all the movies and success in all the other media and the awareness that's brought about of the comic fan, is people know what they got now. It's a lot harder to find those kind of deals and those diamond in the rough kinds of things.
Well, let's talk about creators for a moment. Who are your all-time favorite comic book creators? You mentioned Chris Claremont already. You mentioned Jonathan Hickman. Any other names that pop in mind, either writers or artists?
Yeah, so Charles Soule stuff I've always kind of dug, and I've kind of gotten to know him a little bit through social media, and I brought him to one of our shows one time. So his Daredevil run was awesome. One of my favorites. Snyder and Capullo's Batman run was incredible.
So good.
It's another one of those that I'm like, okay, I have to pick up all the trades, keep them on my iPad, and when I run out of stuff to read, I'll go back and I'll reread those. Tom King stuff also, Mr. Miracle and Vision and all those kind of world warping types of stories. And maybe that kind of goes back to what I said earlier about I'm a sucker for an alternate universe. I'm a sucker for just kind of having my mind messed with by a comic, I think.
Yeah, no, oh, go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I was just going to say, the Snyder Capullo Batman, actually the last comic book I read was actually the first of their new Last Night on Earth that is coming out in sort of a prestige format. Really, really good and you want to talk about mind warping?
Yeah.
It is. I'm still not sure I know what happened, but I know it was awesome. So, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you mentioned, throwing stuff on your iPad constantly or pulling up Marvel Unlimited when you're, or what have you. But you're still picking up print stuff. So how do you feel about the kind of still, I don't know if people are fully embracing the digital transition yet or not, or what are your thoughts on in terms of the readership?
So for me, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. I love the feel of having a physical copy in my hand, but at the same time, it's tough to throw 4 or 5 trades in a backpack and lug it around on a 4-day. So when I'm just for stuff to read, generally speaking, I'm reading it on my iPad. I'm reading, whether it be, whatever I picked up that week, I'm going to immediately pop the codes into my Marvel account and read them on Comixology, and throw the books in a long box and just kind of let them sit there. But, when it comes to collecting runs and stuff, I think it's more almost like an oversized baseball card, like of just like them all. Mm-hmm. But as far as, I see a lot more still physical readers, of guys in the locker room that are picking up stuff. They still like to read the physical media. There's just something to open a book and having the feel of the page in your hand. And I don't know, there's just something, I don't know if it's nostalgic or what it is, but
even the ability, I think, to sort of glance from page to page while you're holding the book spread open, it's something that's difficult to replicate. That ability, this classic, I think about some early 90s comics, Death of Superman with the giant 2-page spreads. It's kind of hard to get across that level of grandeur when you're not holding it in your hand, even though I read digitally as well. Especially for a lot of our retro stuff that we read. I'll look through Marvel Unlimited or DC Universe, but there's something just about the grandness, I think, of the art sometimes when you hold the book in your hands.
For sure, and it really hammers home that, especially like back to creators, Alex, obviously, one of my, I'm not gonna say a life goal, but something that I really want to at some point is to own an Alex Ross original to hang on my wall. Whether that ever happens, we'll see. But it's one of those things when you said an Alex Ross book with the cover, it just hammers home, wow, somebody actually did, this is a real piece of artwork that somebody did by hand and poured their heart and their soul into. It doesn't necessarily come across when you're just looking at it on a screen.
I certainly not an original, but I still have I shouldn't say still have, when Alex Ross did a line of posters for Marvel's 75th anniversary, the Thor one that he did, I went out and bought immediately in France. Still hanging on my wall. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful. I can feel you on the Alex Ross art. You mentioned you've been with the company since 2012, kind of got back into comics in 2015. As you're traveling throughout the country, what are some of your favorite shops? City, when hey, I'm going to a certain city, this shop is awesome, I got to stop by here because I might be able to find something good.
Yeah, so there's a shop in Lafayette, Louisiana, and I know he's going to kill me. I can't remember the name of the shop, but my guy Jeff Lejeune runs in Lafayette, Louisiana. I always make it a point to stop by, visit him. A friend to all of us, on not just in the company, but even just on the referee side of things. And he always does right by us, and great store, great service, great selection. But beyond that, obviously there's the midtowns and and the Mile Highs and the big famous stores. There's not really anything that's jumped out at me as far as a local shop that I'm like, oh man, I have to go by here. Aside from my man Jeff in Lafayette.
Shout out to Jeff in Lafayette. We'll have to check that out if we're in the area. That's not terribly far from my old stomping ground, so I have to check that out someday. But one of the things that we run into, I think all of us run into eventually, if you've collected comics for a long time, space issues. How do you deal with the space issues on just storing all this stuff?
I actually... in my closet, I keep all of my long boxes, or short boxes actually, to just about the bottom of my shirts. So it's pretty much taking up every square inch of space I have in my closet, and I'm kind of maneuvering around to get to stuff and moving boxes around to get to the one I need to. Luckily, space issue has not become an issue as of yet. But man, I'm sure if I keep traveling, it's going to be
the day will get there.
Yep.
Well, let's kind of circle back to outside media. I want to kind of just ask you a few, standard questions, ask guests and things of that nature when we'd have them on other shows. What is your favorite comic book movie?
Favorite comic book movie? I that always seems to change whenever there's a new release, and it kind of as of right now, Into the Spider-Verse, I still is absolutely up there. I know obviously In-Game and the grandeur and the scale of both In-Game and Infinity War taken as a two-piece set are incredible, and I'm firmly in the camp of Robert Downey Jr. for an Oscar.
Oh, but 100%. We were saying that the week, like 2 days after the movie when we saw it, we were doing about this dude deserves. He won't get one, but he deserves one.
Yeah, maybe we can give him like a comic book Oscar or something. But no, Into the Spider-Verse was awesome from not just a fan service standpoint, but just the art felt like you were watching a comic come to life, and to me that really kind of resonates, with the longtime fandom. Going back to the 90s and kind of the origins of even before that, the origins of Spider-Man with the Ditko artwork and kind of some of the visual things he would do, kind of resonated through in that movie a little bit, I think.
You talk about love letters. That movie, to me, felt like a love letter to all eras of Spider-Man, but it was revolutionary. I remember when the trailer originally dropped, I was like, I don't know about this art style, I just don't know. I mean, I'm glad Miles is getting a movie, but I didn't light my world on fire. Then I saw the movie, and I was like, what was I thinking? It took me about 5 minutes to adjust to the art style, and then when I did, I was like, this is the future. This is a level of ahead of the curve that I hadn't seen since probably like The Incredibles many, many years ago. It was so good. And I'm assuming that's something that's kind of fun to watch with the whole team.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, like I said, when I went to see that in the theater, I took my 11-year-old with me. My 3-year-old's not quite there for going for a theater going experience, but he's discovered it now that it's on Netflix, and absolutely he loves it as well. He wants to watch the Spider-Man movie with me. And that's another thing with the PlayStation game that came out a year ago now, give or take.
God.
You want to talk a love letter to the Spider-Man fandom? With all the alternate costumes and throwbacks and callbacks and things in there. But it's so funny when I play that if I play it in the living room as opposed to taking it on the road with me, and my youngest is there with me, he will not let me use any costume other than the classic Spider-Man costume. If I try to throw the Iron Spider or the Armored Spider-Man or something, one of those wacky or whatever, he's like, no, that's not Spider-Man. I want the Spider-Man costume.
That's awesome. Sometimes the classic suits are classics for a reason. It's amazing how some of those the 50s and 60s stood the test of time. I made this comment to my buddy Russell Sellers recently about the Flash costume, that they pretty much got it right with the Barry Allen Flash costume, and every time they've tried to modify it, it's kind of had, eventually they just go back to the way it was. With a few little tinkerings here and there. And the same way with Spider-Man's got so many great costumes, but that one just stands the test of time, no doubt. One of the things I loved about Spider-Verse is it did kind of what Jeff Johns did in his Green, which is find a way to serve every fan, no matter who your favorite character was. So with Green Lantern, if you were a Hal Jordan fan or a Kyle Rayner fan or a Guy Gardner fan or John Stewart, he found ways to serve every segment of fandom and show you that all of them had value. Spider-Verse could have just been a Miles Morales movie, and it would have been great. But instead, they also found a way to say, hey, here's Peter Parker, and he's great too. And here's this sort of older, schlubby Peter Parker, and he's good too. And, finding a way to serve all these different audiences. it's really just an incredible thing, and you see that in some of the great comic book runs as well. Were there any comics that you're reminded of when you're watching Into the Spider-Verse? Does it remind you in particular of a run or a comic in terms of its to all these different audiences?
That's another thing I feel like that X-Men ultimately does relatively well with in bringing characters from the 90s or from the 80s or even before that can pop back in nowadays and just dive right back in. The resurgence of Wolfsbane in the just prior to Hickman run, obviously died well, but some of the New Mutants characters kind of popping back into things. It was one of those throwbacks of, hey, these characters still have value. There's still something to this, and I don't know if that was maybe setting up unintentionally or intentionally as the case. I know they've announced the New Mutants book spinning out of House of X, Powers of X, and some of that sort of thing. But, just the random reappearances of characters. That's like, oh yeah, no, that was my, in 95 or whatever the case may be.
Right. I'm waiting for them to bring back Boomer and Rusty and Skids, rather.
Skids, yeah.
Yeah. Those were my young mutants when I was a kid. Game, that was going to be another question. Is that your favorite comic book video game, or do you have another one?
It's got to be up there. And we'll see if it stands the test of time. I feel like it probably will. But obviously the Arkham series was incredible for its time. But yeah, I feel like X-Men Legends, and Ultimate Alliance, that whole era of games
that defined my college years.
Yep.
Oh man. I think Ultimate Alliance 2 may still be the last game I actually did a midnight and stood in line and waited with the with the line wrapped around the block, which isn't really happening for physical media anymore. But.
No, not so much. We had the all-night sessions with all the Ultimate Alliance games and the X-Men Legends games. It's ridiculous.
It was another one of those, you talk about fan service, that would have 4 alternate costumes for each character, and each one of them you could pinpoint. Oh wait, that's from this. That's this character in this run, and that's one of the things I feel like kind of dropped the ball with Ultimate Alliance 3, which, don't get me wrong, great game, and I really enjoy it. But the costumes are they feel like just pops instead of actual callbacks to anything, which is really disappointing.
Yeah. And I'm kind of the opposite of your son in terms of, I was that kid that was always wanting the alternate costumes just because they were different. So that's kind of one of the things I enjoyed about the Ultimate Alliance games is that ability to sort of you want to play the brown and tan Wolverine costume or Weapon X costume or the Venom but the symbiote costume for Spider-Man abilities, which would make them feel special. What about the arcade games? Did you ever play any of the classic X-Men arcade game or the Punisher or Avengers or any of those?
I did. I played the absolute hell out of the X-Men arcade game.
Oh, so good.
The others I never really, and again, going back and stuck on a military base, not stuck, but living on a military base, you're kind of beholden to what happened to be at the bowling alley or the movie theater, and they always seem to have WrestleFest and X-Men the arcade game, where that took pretty much all of my elementary years.
Yes, and all of your elementary quarters.
That too, yeah.
Yeah, those and the Simpsons game were like at every arcade when I was a kid. And I'm on the rare occasions I find an arcade now, I never find WrestleFest at any of them, and it kills me. I do find X-Men on occasion. I'm so weird in this because I may be the biggest fan in the world of the Punisher arcade game from the 90s, where Nick Fury is inexplicably the Punisher's partner, and it's a fight, but with the Punisher. So those were fun games. We actually got you to send in a list for our MCU show, where we were kind of putting together a countdown of the MCU movies, the official rankings of all the movies. And while we got you on here, I'll ask you kind of your overall view of the MCU. What are your favorites from the MCU, and where do you see it going from here? What are you excited about moving forward?
Yeah, so It's like I mentioned earlier, it's one of those things where pretty much, to me at least, and maybe it's just the fanboy in me, but every movie has been pretty note perfect as far as really capturing the essence of the characters. Even the ones that were about going in, just like, everybody else, obviously Guardians of the Galaxy, I wasn't super familiar with the source material, and obviously there was some changes made to fit the movie, but you come out of like, oh, okay, no, that was pretty dead on to what I expect that to have been in hindsight, or Black Panther, I still think, versions of telling me that whole lore of the character and the entire, kind of getting a full picture of who and where he comes from and what his world's like, and, supporting characters and side view. And now you have this whole other world that you can delve into at any given point of Wakanda, and, as far as where it's going in the future, man, watching those, San Diego Comic-Con reveals come through, obviously on Twitter, because I don't get to go to San Diego Comic-Con.
Right.
Watching those come through on Twitter is one of those, something new would come across me, like, oh man, I can't wait for that. Oh wait, that's even better. Oh man, that's even better. Oh my God, Blade's back. But like, I feel like each of them kind of has something cool and something different to offer. Loki, I think I'm really excited about that one, because it feels like, just from what I'm reading, that it's almost like Loki but Quantum Leap.
Yeah, a little bit of
that intrigues me, and I'm curious to see with WandaVision and obviously the artwork that's dropping on that, with kind of the idyllic 50s theme, if that pulls maybe some themes from the Tom King Vision run, or if any of that's in there, I don't know.
Bringing in Wanda's advanced power with reality warping potentially. So
exactly, especially going into with her being announced for the new Doctor Strange and the multiverse. I think that kind of thing really, especially with the multiverse aspect added in there, is that how we get Fantastic Four? Is that how we get mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? I feel like there's so many new directions they can go with things. It's a really cool time to be a fan.
At this point, could Marvel pretty much make a movie about the most obscene? You would have faith that it would work.
I'm looking forward to the Eternals, if that tells you anything.
Yes.
I think Feige at this point just has the Midas touch that no matter what he gets his hands on, it'll turn to gold. If you're listening, Sony.
We, you mentioned all the announcements coming across at San Diego Comic-Con. We're getting ready for the launch of Disney Plus, which is going to have so many. We're in an era where we're getting 3-4 MCU movies a year. DC is cranking out stuff on the CW. Greg and I talk about all the time. We feel so overwhelmed, where, like, when we were kids, 1 or 2 comic book shows, and you better watch them, because if they got poor ratings,
even if they sucked,
you were afraid you were not going to get anything else. Now there's so much, it's almost impossible to keep up. And with you being on the road all the time, how do you pick and choose, and how do you keep up with this like constant deluge of comic book content?
And it's weird, the ones that I would have the easiest access to watch on an airplane or whatever, the Netflix series that you can download for an offline watch, are the ones that I'm the most behind on. Because when it comes to the movies, become a thing that when there's a new movie at maybe not necessarily the midnight release, but that 7 o'clock in the evening, the night before pre-midnight release, my oldest and I are going to go and going to dress up, and we're that's just our thing. So I always seem to catch the movies as they come out, but the series, man, it's hard to keep up. And I don't know. We'll see how Disney Plus works. Obviously, I'm going to be a day one subscriber, especially with a 3-year-old Disney Princess fan in the house. I'm very curious to see how that platform works with regards to downloading things to be able to watch offline, and in situations where you don't have a connection to keep up with things. Because again, that's the time when I'm sitting on a plane for 3 or 4 hours headed to Wichita or Walla Washington, or wherever we happen to be on any given day, that I actually have time to catch up on any, or sitting in a hotel room, far flung town.
I guess that sort of also makes sense of why comics and wrestling have such a crossover. Is you do have a lot of travel, so that's a lot of time to read.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know how I still managed to be backlogged, but yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible the amount of content that we have. We live in really the content era. There's so much content to try to keep up with if you're a fan of these things. Especially being a comics and wrestling fan, there's just so much out to try to keep up with. It's inevitable that you get behind. Thank God for DVR. Thank God for these digital reading services.
Yeah, for sure. And it feels like that's kind of becoming a thing, not necessarily just but almost across the board. There's just such a deluge of content that you have to pick and choose, or you're just going to be overwhelmed.
Oh, totally. And we're still discovering gems that we've passed over the years to keep up with the ones that we were kind of focused on about our favorite characters. We just read Garth Ennis's The Boy, which inspired the Prime, and really enjoyed that. And that's a series that when it was coming out, I just flat out said, I can't read it. I'm buying like 4 Batman books and a Green Lantern book every month. It's hard to pick up. But the
well, I think, Greg, we would be remiss, in this interview if we did not ask, since he is, such a massive fan of both comics and wrestling. What about wrestling comics? Do we have any of those that stick out in your mind? What are your experiences with the Wild and Wacky Worlds comic books?
Man, I religiously bought the WCW comic in like 92, 93, whatever that was, and I still have them. I pulled them out maybe a month or two ago. I just moved back from Indiana back down to Orlando to do some work down at NXT, but I pulled those out in the move and just kind of read through them a little bit. I'm like, God, these were garbage, but they were so good, but so bad. What happened? But yeah, no, I do read some of the stuff we put out with Boom.
Mm-hmm. We read.
I've read a few of those. Yeah, and it was kind of welcome surprise. My son, my oldest, that's another one of the things he started wanting to pick up because he went to WrestleMania in New York with one of our good friends, and they had such a good time that now he's gotten just completely all in on wrestling.
Okay.
And his wrestling fandom has kind of, overtaken a little bit. So now, when I go to my comic shop, he's like, Dad, can I pick up the new WWE comic? And he picked up one the other day that I actually posted about it. I can't remember if it was on Instagram or Twitter or what. It was there was a special issue from this past year. So it probably came out April, May, somewhere around in there. And it was 2 or 3 stories. One of them, and I don't remember who the creative team was, but was kind of recapping Charlotte and Asuka maybe. And one of the shots in there was based on the WrestleMania match from New Orleans last year, which was the match that I refereed at New Orleans WrestleMania last year. So the panels was, Asuka's face on the one side, Charlotte's face on the other side, and then a comic book version of me holding up the SmackDown
how cool. Title. That's awesome.
Yeah, so technically speaking, I think I'm Marvel canon at this point.
God, amazing! That's fantastic. Well, being that you are Marvel canon now, one day I'm going to have to get you to explain to me the Ultimate Warrior comic. One of the most bizarre things I've ever encountered in all my days.
I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, I also had The Rock #1, which featured The Rock delivering the rock bottom onto a craps table. Okay. So there were a lot of fun adventures in these random, terrible, and yet terribly awesome wrestling comics. Of course, the WCW comic gave a Cactus Jack and his nefarious plot to attack Sting. There was never a limit what could be done with these. One really I've read, Nick still hasn't read it yet, is Headlocked. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that one. It was pretty good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's Michael Kingston's books, right?
That's right, correct.
He's actually a pretty good friend of mine. But yeah, the books are incredible. Actually, read the first 3 trades and then immediately jumped on the Kickstarter for the 4th.
Oh yeah, I was a Kickstarter supporter as well. I was blown away by what he was doing. Really
so good. And it's really cool that people in the end are helping write some of those sub stories. That's kind of gives it an element of realism that you don't get in a lot of the other books.
Well, one thing that as fans, I think is you think about, what if I got a chance to write a comic? Without giving away anything, if that is in the plans, is that something you've thought about? And if so, is there a character that you really would like to write one day?
It's something that I've always kind of kicked around as an idea, as maybe when my wrestling days are done, as somewhat of here in 40, 50, 60, 70 years or whatever it may be. And as far as, a specific character, honestly, I haven't really that far ahead. Obviously, as we've talked at length, as much of an X-Men fan as I am, I wouldn't, hate the opportunity to tackle maybe not necessarily the mainline team, because I, don't overestimate my own self-importance, but, maybe a side book or, something along those lines. I think that would be a bucket list moment. I know there's been some precedent for that. There's been a couple of Marvel books that have been written by, I remember Raven did a side story in Spider-Man, I want to say,
about Crusher. About Crusher Hogan, right?
Yeah, right. And that kind of thing. I think
Punk
Drax was.
Punk, and he also did a short story in Strange Sports Stories for, I think, a Vertigo book that DC put out a while back. That was, I think, his was like a baseball focused story of some sort, but I can't remember. I remember I picked up the issue, but it obviously didn't leave that much of an impression on me.
So what about your favorite? I mean, that's something that kind of goes across fandom. Some people have obscure picks. Some people are basic like me and just go with Wolverine. But who is your favorite X-Man?
I always kind of grabbed
yes,
in my younger years.
My second favorite X-Man.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is about it. He was just so cool. Especially in the 90s, just so cool.
It was the jacket. I think the jacket was so cool.
And then kind of in the more gravitating towards, like you said, some of the more obscure characters. So like Glob in Age of X-Man was so much fun. Just some of that kind of. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of, you always kind of end up coming back to your first love, and Gambit's still kicking around.
Yeah, I was the. I was the quintessential '90s kid. Wolverine and Gambit and Cable, any of the anti-hero X-Men, I was a big fan of. Team Domino was awesome. Always
so many pouches. So many pouches.
Pouches and leather and guns that looked like they would weigh 7,000 pounds to even carry them around. Some characters would have 8 of them.
Hooked from a thin leather strap.
Yeah, so the calf muscles that were enormous with the really tiny ankles.
And no feet.
And no feet at all. Just a great time to be alive and to be a comic book fan. I asked you about the MCU thoughts on the Fox X-Men series. I know you mentioned earlier they've been disasters with the Dark Phoenix. Were there any that were good? Did you like Logan, for instance?
Yeah, so, the first X-Men movie, I think, obviously, was a really seminal moment for comic book fandom in other media, because it was kind of almost the pre-MCU. A lot of black leather that I wasn't really a fan of, but just showing that these characters, you can put them on the big screen and it's gonna sell. There's a market for it. I feel like First Class and Days of Future Past did at least some sort of justice. And then kind of dropped off with Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix, but they always seem to start strong with the first movie or two, and then just by the time they decide they're going to start going Dark Phoenix, for some reason it just falls off, and it hurts my heart.
We did a recent comparison actually between the Dark Phoenix movie and the X-Men 3: The Last Stand, and it's amazing how they both missed the mark in completely. Dark Phoenix is this long, kind of boring, drawn out, uninteresting movie. Last Stand has a ton of stuff happening, some of which is good, but it's condensed into what feels like a 20-minute movie where everything goes by so quickly. So maybe there's a happy medium there for Sunday, Kevin Feige, whoever it may be, to sort of make this story work on the big screen.
And there's so much that can be done there if you just realistically just stay to the source material.
Mm-hmm.
At 3, the story is so, I'm not going to say perfect, but it's such a seminal, iconic story that it feels like it would be hard to screw up, and somehow they managed to twice.
It feels like they always want to skip steps. Like they want to skip the space stuff, or they want to skip the Hellfire Club in particular, and really can't skip anything to make the story feel as big and as important as it should. Before we let you off here, I did want to ask you a wrestling question as well about your wrestling fandom. I asked you about your first comic book. What are your first wrestling memories?
So this one I can answer easily. Is around that same time. We were in Japan, in 1991. Just past SummerSlam 1991, Bret Hart had just won the Intercontinental title, and we hadn't quite moved into the on-base housing we were going to be living in. We just moved overseas. So, school's out, I'm up late, and I'm flipping around the channels, and I happen to catch Primetime Wrestling. And I can remember it plain as day in my mind. And maybe I'm the only guy in the history of ever wrestling fan because of Jameson the Nerd.
Oh my God!
But I'm flipping the channels, and there's this just overblown nerd character with a sock hanging out of his jacket and horn rimmed glasses with the tape in the middle, being berated by Bobby the Brain Heenan. Or no, I'm sorry, it wasn't Bobby Heenan. It was IRS. Berating him and chases him off screen and drags him back into the frame. And as he drags him back into the frame, Bret Hart's on the other end of the guy, and then these two guys put down the nerd and then start brawling over top of the nerd. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
I wonder how Bret feels about the fact that not one of his classic matches, but that segment made you a wrestling fan.
And then obviously, from there, same thing as with comic books. You start digging in and start, going down to Blockbuster and getting the 2-tape WrestleMania 4 or the amazing viewers, and had to watch everything there was to watch. But
absolutely.
Yeah, that's the one that hooked me, man.
That's fantastic. Those shows were so fun. Like every time I watch Primetime on the network now, first of all, Bobby Heenan was such a genius. It's ridiculous. But just the fun and the whimsy, amazing what would strike you and what you remember as a kid. One of the all of the banter between Gorilla and Bobby, and how you can see Gorilla trying not to crack as Bobby is delivering these vicious one-liners. What a fun time. Thanks for sharing that story. And before we sort of start wrapping up, do you have any comic book recommendations for people? Are there any runs that you think kind of got underrated over the years, or anything of that nature that you think people should check out either on Marvel Unlimited or at a comic shop or wherever they might be able to go?
Yeah, so you talk about fun and whimsy, and recent stuff that's been on my pull list since issue 1, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is just such a fun read, and I got the chance to meet Tom Taylor at MegaCon here in Orlando, and just the nicest guy in the world, like fun-loving, kind of jovial sort of dude, and you kind of see that come through in the book. At the same time, they're not afraid to tackle some pretty heavy issues, like there's issue 5 or 6 or whatever, that was the childhood cancer issue. But like just the series from issue 1 up till now, even it's such a fun run, and I feel like people are kind of sleeping on that a little bit.
Well, and I feel like part of that is probably because, like, when I hear Tom Taylor, I think I naturally think about Injustice, or I think about some of his, he's kind of gotten this reputation for writing these very dark stories. They're great stories, but dark stories. So to hear him doing this kind of fun, lighthearted Spider-Man is really a testament to him and his versatility as a writer.
Yeah, for sure. And what was cool about it for me, at least especially from the first issue that really hooked me, was it leaned hard on the neighborhood aspect than on the Spider-Man aspect. Mm-hmm. It kind of showed Spider-Man and Peter's impact on the world around him and on the people that he meets in his everyday life. And, the bum on the kid walking home from school and the mom coming home from work, and how Spider-Man being Spider-Man impacts their everyday lives. Almost in the same kind of vein as Marvel's, if not necessarily so heavy-handed with it.
That's amazing. That's right up our alley. I think both our tastes in comics, and it kind of reminds me of one of my favorite stories of all time. Is actually right after the death of Superman, the funeral for a friend and World Without a Superman era. Louise Simonson, in particular, one of my favorite issues of all time, where you see the grieving around the city. You see Lois going and visiting Clark's parents, or rather, they go to visit her to help her because she's just trying to hold it together and she loses it. And just seeing how these heroes impact the everyday, Bibbo the borrower and people like how the everyday people are affected by the heroes oftentimes can be more interesting to me than the heroes themselves or what they're doing. So that's awesome to hear. I'll have to check that run out. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like those, the trend and those books coming right off of that massive world shattering mega event of the death of Superman, I feel like those kind of got slept on a little bit more than they should have. Agreed.
Because like you said, it really wasn't, it was not necessarily fun's the right word, but it was a different take. It was Superman books without Superman. And it almost felt like people were looking at like, okay, all right, let's hurry up and get the guy with the S back. But, if you go back and you read them now, it's different. It's a different kind of take on things, like you said. Yeah. And really great and patient storytelling as well. Sort of giving us we'd just gotten through this big action set piece of, I think Nick described it to me one time as essentially one giant action scene for 5 issues. And then you go and you have this sort of, no pun intended, dead period where you're kind of grieving with the characters. So it's definitely a cool approach. Well, Jason, tell the people how they can find you on social media for more comics talk, more wrestling talk, etc. Yeah, for sure. I kind of pride myself on being one of the more accessible guys on social media, which is actually how we started talking, obviously, in the first place. But Twitter, Instagram, Jason Ayers, spelled Ayers. On Twitter, I'm the guy with the blue check. But I love to talk comics, love to talk wrestling, just love to. Look, man, I'm on there more than I care to admit. So feel free to bother me. Yeah, it's interesting. Right now, if you go to his Twitter account, folks, he is wanting to talk House of X. So if you've read House of X and you're ready to talk about some of the crazy stuff that Jonathan Hickman's got going on over there, delve to it, man. You'll find some interesting theories out there on the web. I'm sure Jason would love to chat it up about that, right? Yeah, and especially by the time this podcast drops, I'm sure enough time will have passed so we can talk about that crazy spoiler in House of X2 that I don't want to say anything about in case people haven't read it, but oh my God, what a twist. Like, yeah, hit me up. Let's talk. Fantastic. Jason, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, this is awesome. And we'd love to have you back on again. I'd love to come back, man. Thanks for having me, guys. This is a lot of fun. Well, thanks so much to Jason for joining us this week. Great of him to take time out of his busy schedule to help us out on the show. We will definitely have him back in the future. And in the meantime, you can visit us on Twitter. I am at gphillips8652. He is at nickduke87. That's NICKDUKE, and then the rest of it. 87. And you can also join the Place to Be Nation Comics Facebook page. Just go to your Facebook browser, search for Place to Be Nation Comics, join the club. We have lots of fun discussion there. Lots of fun links as well to new comics content coming out. And, I mean, I have an Instagram account, but I don't use it. I don't think Nick uses his. So I don't go have there. One. I'm not familiar with what an Instagram is. Oh, you're very familiar with what an Instagram is, Nick.
I know that for a fact.
Tails out of school.
Out of school. For work, but then I never used it, so they just wanted me to get one, so I don't know why. But anyway, it's there, technically. And our email addresses are not there, so don't email us. And you know what? Probably it was time.
Yeah, probably so.
Probably was time. Those email addresses have long ago gone the way of all things. But in any event, folks, we've got more great content coming your way in the month of September. What are some of the things we got coming their way, Nick?
So we have another installment of, what are we calling it, Greg? I forgot. I think we changed the name.
We changed the name to something else. That Fix It show. That's what I'll call it for now.
About the bad comic book movies that we watch.
Fix It or Nix It. There we go. We're
going to do Fantastic Four, the Josh Trank 2015, I think it was. 15 sounds right.
I think that's correct.
Fantastic Four movie. We'll be doing an
long book hunt on an Unchosen Legion of Superheroes book.
Which again, I submit to you, Greg, is a no-win proposition, but we'll get there when we get there.
We're gonna get killed no matter what we do.
Doesn't matter. If we like it, we didn't like it enough. If we don't like it, it's because we're terrible human beings. There's just nothing we can do here.
We're throwing them a bone though. This is I'm gonna put it up to a vote on Twitter of what book we read for this: the Great Darkness Saga or the Jeff Johns Superman and the Superheroes. Because if it's Jeff Johns, there's a better than 50% chance that we'll like it.
Right.
Not 100%, but a better than 50% chance that we'll like it. But so we're going to put the poll. I'm going to put the poll out there on my Twitter account, gphillips8652.
Greg
give you a chance.
His poll out there on Twitter.
I like to put my wait just a minute. Will you stop? There's a primetime wrestling throwback for you. And we're going to let you guys choose which Legion of Superheroes book that we've never done that, by the way, for long book hunters. We've never put it up to a poll.
No, because we don't really care about your opinions generally.
No. And frankly, most of you don't have opinions about our show.
No, so most of you don't listen to it.
But that notwithstanding, quite frankly, we are going to do that, and we'll have other stuff coming your way, too. Of course, we want to remind you that October is Walking Dead month.
Oh, boy.
Nick has never been less excited for Walking Dead month than he is this year. But
it'll be interesting to jump in for a season premiere
after not having watched the previous season.
Yeah, I'll be just go, oh, things are happening.
Who's that person? Who's that guy? How much does this fellow weigh?
How much does this fellow weigh?
And then in December,
why is everyone taking orders?
And then you'll probably find yourself asking what I did last year. Why didn't they kill off Rick 4 seasons ago? Anyway. And then, of course, in December, we're going to have a really intense month for us, the emotional farewell to Arrow, Hard-Traveling Fanboys, bid farewell to our favorite DC comic, with an entire month dedicated to Stephen Amell and company. So stay tuned to HTF. We got more stuff coming your way. Tune into all the other great shows here at Place to Be Nation. Nick, I just realized we've not done the live read yet.
Oh, we're not going to. We are skipping Giant Size special occasion.
That's right. Giant Size is a special occasion, and we hope that you enjoyed this special episode. Thanks again to Jason Ayers. We'll be back with another Secret Origin here in a few months. I think you guys will like that one, too. Meantime, keep cool, my baby.
Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Place to Be Nations, JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have over 24 podcasts available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We now offer them to you on 2 great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, we dive into topics running the gamut from today's WWE to the glory days of yesteryear and the ins and outs of the territory days. In addition to our full-length shows, we also deliver to you special pod blasts on topics old and new.
The Place to Be Nation Pop feed is a veritable treasure trove of great content, offering tremendous shows covering the land of movies, television, life, comics, and sports, brought to you by the most knowledgeable and insightful folks in the podcast world.
You can find all these great shows, plus archives of our past podcasts from over the past 8 years as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows, plus others, available on PlaceToBeNation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth search projects, and much more. Be sure to support our site by using www.PlaceToBeNation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping. We want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar, ProWrestlingOnly.com, and HistoryOfWrestling.com as well. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation Pop listeners, this is your manager, Todd Weber, here to tell you all about the goings-on, PlaceToBeNation.com. Starting up with our Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed. Last week, the Hard-Traveling Fanboys reviewed The Boys, Volume 1, by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson in this edition of the Longbook Hunters. If you haven't checked out The Boys TV show on Amazon, you really should. It is something else. I loved it. On DC4U, our weekly look at DC Comics, Russell and myself conclude Justice League Month with the hilarious hijinks found in the network TV special from 1979, Legends of the Superheroes, The Roast. And then this week we talked about the bummer summer of DC Comics. Delays, people leaving projects. It's kind of a downer thing. But we did bring some optimism in with a look back at Justice League Unlimited. On the inaugural sports edition of Looking Forward, Looking Back, Andy Atherton is joined by the Cowboy Roger Morissette, Scott Criscolo, and Peter Winson to look forward and preview the upcoming NFL season, as well as look back and analyze the most recent seasons of the NBA and the NHL. The Year in Pop returns, with Andy and Scott being joined by George Ribolino, Dr. G, and J. Arsenio D'Amato. Look at all those good fellas, to discuss the news, sports, and pop culture of 1977. On a brand new Sunday Groove, David and guest Andy Helene discuss their personal Desert Island discs. And the Marvel Age podcast is back. We cover 1972. We've got Werewolf by Night, Tomb of Dracula, Fantastic Four, lots of great reading, plus the Kree Skrull War. Facebook users, go to the PTVN's Greatest Song of the 80s tournament, like the page. We are continuing the Greatest Song of the 80s tournament. There's 4 polls a day. We're in round 3. Never Gonna Give You Up is going strong. Sweet Child of Mine probably going to take it all, in my opinion. But like the page, vote every day. It is a ton of fun. Over on the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, we've got the PTBN Mothership, the Place to Be podcast. JT Scott and Peter Winson take a look at the last Saturday night's main event of 1989. Ben Zani has a football-themed episode of Row 1, Seat 1 with a pair of guests who discuss the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins. On episode 3 of Extreme Three-Way Dance, JT, D'Amato, and Jenny run down the entire month of ECW Hardcore TV following the night the line was crossed from 1994. And on episode number 7 of You Don't Know Billy Jack, Drew introduces Jordan to Jumbo Saruta versus Gingichu Tenaru from June 5th, 1989. Lots of 1989. We're also paying tribute to 1994, 25 years. We've got lots of great content and articles, podcasts, lots of stuff talking about that great year in pop culture. Every Wednesday on Place to Be Nation, we've got the most interesting and unexpectedly funny stories on the World Wide Web on Glenn's Weekly Walk. Great collection of links for Wednesday reading. Check out our social media pages and message board at www.bigelow34.proboards.com for information on joining our GWWE pay-per-view and TV Match Ever project. Get in on the conversation today. Start researching your list. Those are due at the end of the year. We'll see what the best pay-per-view match is. I'm going with Steamboat Savage. Thanks again for listening to the Hard-Traveling Fanboys here on Place to Be Nation Pop.